Behind every illness, behind every troubling symptom, there is always a story. Often, it is not just the body that suffers, but the heart and mind as well, carrying unspoken emotions, hidden memories, and unresolved conflicts. What you are about to hear is not fiction. These are 10 real cases of healing, guided by a real homeopathic doctor who worked with patients by uncovering the deeper causes of their pain. Through dialogue with the subconscious, each patient discovered the roots of their suffering, and with that awareness, their path to recovery began. This collection shows us that true healing is not only about medicine. It is also about self-understanding, forgiveness, and the courage to change. A man came to see the doctor with complications following a severe case of pneumonia. The illness had been brutal, and his body could no longer tolerate antibiotics. When they explored the subconscious causes, it turned out that shortly before he fell ill, he had a serious conflict with his boss at work. The clash left him with deep resentment toward his boss, which soon expanded into resentment toward the whole world. You see, the doctor began to explain. Resentment is a hidden subconscious wish for death, not just for one person, but for their entire family line. That destructive program eventually came back to its author, in this case, you, in the form of illness. As a kind of punishment, the man asked. Not at all. Illness is not punishment. It is simply a result, a physical reflection of your thoughts and emotions. A thought is a special form of energy, encoded information. And it must have some corresponding expression on the physical level. If the thought is destructive, like resentment, judgment, or hatred, then on the physical plane it will manifest as illness. So what should I do now? The patient asked. The only way to neutralize that program is to forgive and even thank your boss for the situation. How can I thank him when he was wrong? Forgiving, maybe, but thanking. Actually, the gratitude should first go to the higher mind, to God, for this situation. And you also need to understand that the source of the resentment is not in your boss, it is in you. You created this situation yourself. Let's find out right now what drew this conflict into your life. They continued working with the man's subconscious and uncovered the deeper causes. Years of accumulated irritation and dissatisfaction with his boss, frustration with his job, and a lack of self-confidence. Once the man neutralized the negative subconscious program through repentance, forgiveness, and gratitude, and changed his attitude toward himself, his work, and his boss, the illness disappeared without a trace. In the end, the illness became a catalyst for his inner growth and development. If he had simply tried to suppress the symptoms, the self-destructive program he had triggered through his resentment would have been much harder to stop later. Eventually, it could have worked not only against him, but against his children as well. In fact, not long after he got sick, his son developed hives. He never connected the two events, yet the boy's skin cleared up. Immediately after, the father experienced his own inner cleansing. An older woman came in to see the doctor, complaining about excessive drooling and a constant bad taste in her mouth that followed her everywhere. She'd done all the tests, seen just about every specialist, and no medical issues had been found. After learning how to communicate with her subconscious, she recalled an incident from about 6 months earlier. She had a falling out with her best friend after acting in a very dishonest way toward her, and she refused to admit she was wrong. It wasn't a pleasant story. As she finished telling it, she said, "That whole thing left a really bad taste in my mouth." Then she looked at the doctor in surprise. "Doctor, could that really be the reason?" She had answered her own question. The doctor advised her to go see her former friend, tell her the whole truth, and ask for forgiveness. Sometime later, she came back for another appointment, beaming. She said she was once again able to enjoy her meals and she had mended her friendship. A 40-year-old woman came to see the doctor with a uterine fibroid. The tumor had first appeared 5 years earlier and had been growing steadily ever since. She was advised to have surgery, warned that the tumor could turn from benign to malignant, but she decided to try an alternative approach. Once she established contact with her subconscious mind, her inner wisdom revealed the cause: years of pent-up resentment toward her husband. 5 years earlier, after a serious rift in the marriage, her husband began drinking, and with each passing year, his drinking got worse. The household became a constant battlefield. Arguments, fights, insults, accusations. The tumor, it turned out, was the physical embodiment of 5 years' worth of grudges. And why the uterus specifically? Because the resentment was directed toward a man wounding her sense of womanhood. The uterus is the organ that symbolizes feminine identity. When they dug deeper, they discovered that even before marriage, she'd had menstrual cycle irregularities. The root of that issue was a negative attitude toward herself as a woman, an attitude she had inherited from her mother. Incidentally, her mother's own relationships with men had been far from smooth. The woman came to understand that her illness and her husband's behavior were linked to her own attitudes toward herself and toward men. She began to change those attitudes using specific techniques. She started to love and respect herself as a woman, to treat herself with care. She shifted her perspective on men, and she transformed much in how she related to people and to the world in general. She also took homeopathic remedies. Within a year, the fibroid completely dissolved. Her relationship with her husband improved dramatically, and he stopped drinking. It's worth noting that such a result was only possible because she did profound inner work. Her determination to heal was unshakable. She didn't turn to surgery or conventional medication, she turned inward, addressing the true causes of her illness. A woman brought her 14-year-old daughter to see the doctor. The girl had an obsessive need to wash her hands several times a day, spending 20 to 30 minutes at the sink each time. Psychiatrists had diagnosed her with schizophrenia, started her on heavy psychotropic medication, and even administered insulin shock therapy. The doctor didn't waste any time and immediately guided her into a deep hypnotic trance. Her subconscious mind told the following story. Not long ago, when she was 9, she had been given a budgerigar as a birthday gift. Before they bought a cage, the bird roamed freely around the apartment. One day, as the girl ran into the kitchen, she didn't notice the parakeet on the floor and accidentally stepped on it. When she picked it up, it was already dead and her hands were stained with blood. She felt sorry for the bird, but even more, she feared her mother's reaction. So she buried the little parrot in the bushes outside and told her mother it had flown out the open window. Her urge to confess was battling with her fear of punishment and her guilt, and those feelings fueled her strange behavior. Her subconscious was quite literally trying to wash away the blood from her hands, along with the guilt. Once she released the guilt, her behavior returned to normal. But there was another interesting twist. As the doctor led the girl into trance, her mother, who was sitting nearby, also slipped into trance spontaneously. She too had a compulsion. Whenever she sat down, she felt an uncontrollable urge to shake her leg. After that session with her daughter, the mother's compulsion disappeared as well. Apparently, her subconscious had revisited certain past events and changed the way she related to them. A young woman came to see the doctor complaining of pain in her right groin. The medical diagnosis was chronic adnexitis. Its pain had started unexpectedly 3 years earlier. To the time, based on her symptoms, doctors suspected appendicitis and performed surgery. The appendix was indeed inflamed, but after the operation, the pain didn't go away. The surgeons referred her to a gynecologist who made their own diagnosis and prescribed treatment. Nothing worked. She even went to psychics who claimed to remove the evil eye and curses, but still, no result. Desperate, she turned to homeopathy. The remedies significantly improved her condition, but after a while, the pain returned. The patient told the doctor she suspected the cause wasn't in her ovaries at all, but something else. They decided to ask her subconscious for the answer. It wasn't easy. First, they established an official contact with her subconscious. Then they located the event that had triggered the problem. Strangely enough, it turned out to be the operation itself. The doctor guided her into a hypnotic trance and took her back to the very moment of surgery. She had been under intravenous anesthesia at the time. "I can hear the doctors talking," she said in trance. "Yes, there's the anesthesiologist. He's on my right, checking my pulse. Now he's speaking directly to me. It's useless. Everything will stay the same." The doctor suggested she go back a little further and listen more carefully to what the doctors were saying. "I can barely make out the words. The noise from the ventilation is in the way." Ah, they're talking about their chief doctor. They're saying he doesn't pay them while he keeps collecting his own salary. Now one of them suggests they all go and confront him. And now the anesthesiologist says everything will stay the same. But I realize now he wasn't talking to me. The patient came out of trance, smiling, relieved to have understood her mistake. The next day, she called the doctor to say the pain was completely gone and she felt wonderful. A woman came to see the doctor. She was suffering from a long list of serious illnesses, the most destructive being rheumatoid arthritis in her hands and feet. She could barely walk, and her hand joints were starting to deform. She was plagued by severe headaches, insomnia, various neurotic reactions, and ailments of the throat, heart, liver, and kidneys. To make matters worse, she had been taking powerful medications for many years, which had left their own damaging effects. Normally, working with such patients is very difficult, but she turned out to be a good hypnotic subject. In trance, her subconscious revealed its secret. It was using illness to punish her for various wrongdoings and mistakes. This craving for self-punishment had run through her entire life, starting in childhood. She repeatedly found herself in situations that caused injuries, breaking arms and legs. She let herself gain excessive weight, halted her physical development, paid no attention to her appearance, and dressed sloppily despite having been an attractive woman. Her parents had played a key role in shaping this exaggerated sense of guilt. They constantly appealed to her conscience and responsibility, punishing her for every transgression, no matter how small. Their favorite phrase was, "God will punish you." Without realizing it, they had passed down to their daughter a subconscious program of self-destruction. Over the years, she built a worldview in which the dominant feeling was guilt. The destructive mechanism of self-punishment kicked in whenever she made a mistake or did something wrong. What was most striking was that she had no idea where her illnesses came from. For years, she went from doctor to doctor, who merely suppressed her pain and symptoms while at the same time damaging her liver, kidneys, and stomach. She couldn't grasp that the root cause of her illness was within herself. It would have been impossible for the doctor to reprogram her subconscious in a single session, and explaining everything to her conscious mind would have been pointless. So he took a simpler route. In hypnotic trance, the doctor appeared in different periods of her life as a wise and kind teacher, helping her develop a new way of seeing the world. Over the next few months, the woman changed dramatically. She forgot about her illnesses, became very attractive, and, not long after, married successfully and gave birth to a child. She knew she'd raise her kid way differently than how she was brought up. An elderly woman came to see the doctor, suffering from severe depression. She told him a long story about her life and illness. She had worked as a dentist. She had 3 children who lived in other cities, while her youngest daughter lived with her and was also depressed after being abandoned by the man she loved. The woman had divorced her husband many years earlier. She also admitted that she had undergone 15 abortions. She had virtually no friends, no relationships with her neighbors. She and her daughter spent their days sitting at home, crying. As the doctor listened to her long story, he decided to try an unusual approach. "You know," the doctor began, "many physicians haven't been able to help you. And I doubt I'll be able to help either. But I do have one plan that may bring you relief. "Are you willing to follow my medical instructions?" "I'm willing to do anything," the patient replied. "I have no other choice." The doctor asked, "Do you have any houseplants?" "No," she answered. "I've never kept houseplants, too much trouble." "Then listen carefully to my assignment. Go to a flower shop and buy 15 different houseplants. They must all be different kinds. Since you've never grown plants and have no experience, also buy a book on caring for indoor plants and study it carefully. You'll need to take care of 15 plants, each of which requires very careful attention. Figure out how much light and water each one needs, arrange them properly in your apartment, and care for them. Give each plant its own name. You may need extra pots for propagation. Get those in advance. Once you have enough young plants, start giving them away to your former colleagues and your neighbors on every possible occasion. Holidays, birthdays, weddings, and so on. In addition to those 15 plants, buy 3 cacti. They're very undemanding, needing almost no care. Occasionally glance at them, but the other 15 will require a lot of time and attention. Sometime later, the woman returned to the doctor, this time with her daughter. She looked joyful and full of life. "Doctor," she began, "I'm so grateful to you. I feel wonderful now. My life is going great. The only thing that worries me is my daughter's mood. But after seeing how much I've changed, she said she'd like to be treated by you too." A month later, the doctor was able to bring the daughter back to life as well. A man came to see the doctor, suffering from severe headaches that had started after a concussion. The moment he walked into the office, the doctor immediately understood the cause. There was no need to even consult the patient's subconscious. The reason for the pain was simple: jealousy of his wife. He had no proof she was unfaithful, only suspicions and doubts. But the result of that jealousy was the concussion and the headaches. After all, jealousy hits the head first, since at its core, it is rooted in hatred. Once the man worked through his feelings, his headaches disappeared. His relationship with his wife improved. A woman was suffering from persistent heart pain that began after a heart attack. By establishing contact with her subconscious, she discovered that the heart attack had been triggered by destructive thoughts and emotions like anger, hatred, resentment, pity, and a desire for revenge. These emotions were tied to a specific event: her son's divorce. She simply could not accept it. Her anger and hatred toward her daughter-in-law, her pity for her son and grandchild, all took shape in the form of heart disease. It turned out that her life had been filled with similar events that stirred up the same kinds of emotions. Only after she revisited those memories and changed her attitude toward them was she finally able to free herself from the pain in her heart. A 17-year-old guy was afraid of riding trolleys, buses, the subway, or even elevators. The moment he stepped into any kind of public transport, he'd start feeling uneasy. He had no idea why he reacted this way, but nothing happens for no reason. A doctor taught him how to communicate with his subconscious mind. And his very first question was whether there had been an event in his life that triggered this behavior. The answer was yes. Through a series of follow-up questions, they pinpointed the exact incident. It happened when he was 8 years old. His parents punished him for some misbehavior by locking him for a long time in a dark closet. Years later, after some minor act of mischief, he ended up at the police station and spent the night alone in a holding cell. From that point on, the fear set in because his subconscious had linked those two events and drawn a conclusion. A closed space could be a threat to his freedom. Once he understood the cause, the problem dissolved easily. After that, he rode the bus for a long time, just for the fun of it, till he eventually got bored. These 10 stories show us that illness is never random. Behind every diagnosis lies an emotional history, a burden of anger, fear, guilt, or pains, that, if left unresolved, begins to speak through the body. By listening to the subconscious, these patients discovered the hidden roots of their suffering and, step by step, reclaimed their health. Healing is not just the absence of symptoms. It is a transformation, a shift in how we see ourselves, others, and the world around us. The real cure begins the moment we take responsibility for our inner life, forgive the past, and choose to live differently. These cases remind us of a powerful truth. The body, mind, and spirit are inseparable. And when they come into harmony, even the deepest wounds can heal.